Hey, everybody, welcome to After the Whistle. I'm Mike Pereira. Yes, I'm the head of officiating for the USFL. And, usually I have somebody to interview, which is kind of cool. But this week I had a little hard time getting somebody. So I'm going to do something I always wanted to do. I'm going to interview myself. I'm going to ask questions of myself so you can get my input on some things. And then we're going to look at a player safety issue that has become a concern for me. But I'm going to interview myself. So I guess the first question I would ask myself is, hey, you're headed to the playoffs, Mike. How did you pick the officials that are going to work the playoffs? Good question, Mike. I've always been a crew guy. So therefore, the one thing I set out to do when I was going to assign the officials for both of the semifinal games and the championship game was to use full crews. Without exceptions, unless there was a conflict, somebody had a job conflict or a vacation conflict. And so of the three crews, basically, I have two of them that are completely full of their regular crew members and one where I just had to make one substitution. And I think that's very important. And it goes to the general question is, where do you get your best officiating? Do you get it from a group of people that have been working together all year, or do you get it from all-stars? So you bring in separate people to work together that haven't worked together all year. I've always been a crew guy, back to my NFL days. I mean, back to 2001. I basically determined that we would use the crew system for our playoffs. And I thought it worked. You didn't spend time talking about ball mechanics and things. You had already been doing that all year long. You knew each other's strengths and you knew your weaknesses. And so we went for a period of 3 years where basically it was crew-based and not individual-based. But not everybody bought into that. Officials who graded out as number one in their position didn't necessarily make it into the playoffs, or didn't get the Super Bowl, even though they were ranked number one. And personally, I didn't care, because I didn't care about the best officials. I cared about the best officiating. So going forward in the USFL, from this point on, as long as I am involved, we are going to make our playoff assignments crew-based. And I started the season by putting 5 crews together that I thought were of equal ability. It's hard to do when you have 7 people making up a crew, but by the time Steve Stremling, my coordinator, and Ron Baines, my supervisor, by the time we met and put these crews together, we felt that they were basically even. And as it turned out, that's really the way it was. When you look at their performance throughout the whole season, equal. So you're gonna have James Carter and you're gonna have Dwayne Haight in the semifinal game, their crews, and then Alex Moore will be the referee in the championship game. And I'll give you a little heads up. Next Monday, when we sit down, either Monday or Tuesday, we're gonna interview Alex and ask him what it's like preparing to be the referee of the USFL championship game. So that's my feeling about assigning crews to the playoff games. Well, good, Mike. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. Let me ask you another question, Mike. What stats jump out to you when you look at the stats of the league? Give me 2 that jump out. Oh man, that's another good question, Mike. You always ask such good questions. How about 80.7%? 80.7%. That's the number of kickoff returns that we have. Understand completely what the NFL rule is and the interest, of course, in player safety, which we have also. The NFL's rate of return was about 40%, and we are 80.7%, which does add another element to the game in 2 different ways, as far as I'm concerned. Number one is just the excitement of the kickoff return. I mean, it is a fun play. And granted, it is a dangerous play, which is why the NFL addressed the issue and backed up to the kickers to the 35 and had all these different restrictions onto how you could line up, all resulted in more touchbacks. We kick off from the 25, we have more returns, but we also line up the teams closer together. So you're running downfield more so like you're covering a punt. So the injury data has not shown any increase in injuries on kickoff returns, even at 80.7% return. The drive start, you got to look at that too. It certainly benefits the offense. And so you think of the drive start, you know, a touchback, a normal touchback goes out to the 25-yard line, whereas we're sitting at a drive start of 37-yard line. So, you know, additional 12 yards is certainly a boost to the offense, and I think that has been really successful. I quite frankly wasn't sure, but then again, as I watched it all play out, and you had to actually add to the fact too that this unique rule where the kickers can't recover the ball once it goes 20 yards has taken away the squib kick, has taken away the pooch kick. And so we really just have traditional kickoffs returns that, you know, I think fans and certainly I enjoy. Well, Mike, what was the other one the other number you like? I like 41. 41? Yeah, 41 points per game. I mean, points per game, that was one of my biggest concerns before we got into this league starting out. Were we going to have enough points? I mean, people do like to see offense. That's just a fact. Defense wins championships, so they say. Fans, though, whether they're watching on TV or at a game site, like to see offense generally. So we're averaging 41 points a game. That's, to me, really good for one reason. We did not institute any defensive restrictions. When I was back at the AAF, we set up an imaginary box behind the defensive line of scrimmage, and we told linebackers, if you're going to blitz, you have to do it from that box. You can only blitz so many. It caused a lot of chaos, both in officiating, you know, and fans trying to understand when a foul was called for an illegal formation, what was it? And so it was all done because in the AAF, we wanted to make sure that we got the points that we needed. And if we gave the defense the opportunity to blitz as many players as they want, as many times as they want, then we would absolutely suffocate the offense. So crossed our fingers, and I said, let's go with no restrictions. And that's what we've done. Real smart to me in the way that the draft was approached by Brian Woods and Daryl Johnson, who basically went rounds of draft by position. So in the first round, everybody drafted a quarterback. They took offensive linemen, and they established that offensive linemen were going to be a priority. And I think you have to look at it and say, cool, it worked. Again, because of 41 points per game. The NFL had a big year last year. They averaged 46. And their offenses are generally a little bit more complex. But for us to average 41 points without any defensive restrictions was, I don't know, almost like a dream come true for me. And I feel like that going into the playoffs with the 4 teams that are headed to Canton, that we're going to see those points remain up. Yes, we have, you know, the one outlier that is a 10-6 game or something, but we've also had the big points with some good solid quarterback play. And then lately the defense has stepped up and returned some turnovers for scores. So those excite me. Well, Mike, okay, I'm going back to the interviewer guy again. All right, now what concerns you? What concerns me is the illegal use of the helmet, and what really popped up in week 10. You know, the NFL has a rule, it's called illegal use of the helmet. And basically you cannot lead with the helmet, period. You can't lead with it when you're making a tackle. You can't lead with it if you're a runner, lowering your head and initiating the contact into the defender. You can't use it when you're blocking. I mean, it's basically the attempt to take the helmet out of the game. While I understood it, I feel like over the course of the few years that this has been in the NFL, that it has really been inconsistently officiated. It's really hard. The hardest part being who initiates it, because half the time both players are lowering their heads. So we at the USFL decided, yes, we understand the rule and we'll keep the rule, but we're going to lay off calling it when it comes to a defensive player making a tackle on a runner, or if it is a runner lowering his head. And for the most part, I think it's been okay until week 10. I mean, if you look at the Philadelphia, New Jersey game with 7:59 left to go, this was a helmet shot that was called. And I think that's what surprised me in this case, that it was called, because we had said we were not going to overlook it, but we would address it if we needed to, individual with the player after the fact. So it surprised me that it was called. I wasn't in the replay booth last weekend. Thank you, COVID. But nevertheless, it was reversed in replay, and the flag was picked up because they felt in replay that they didn't have a clear enough shot to show that there was actual helmet contact. And you know, you can call it what it is. I hate the word targeting, but if you want to call it targeting, it's the same concept. I kind of felt that it was there, but it kind of set up a precedent that kind of showed itself a little bit later, because if you go to the helmet hit in the 7:29 now, in the fourth quarter, I think the first one was the third quarter, this one's worse and it wasn't called. And this one was a shot on the quarterback. Look, at the quarterback's a runner, so he basically doesn't get any other protection that anybody else gets. So if this was a forearm to the head, something like that, it's not an issue. That's not a foul. But it is when you lead with the helmet like this. And so I have to look at these two plays, and I have to think a little bit forward about how we're going to address this in going forward this coming weekend in Canton. We don't want these hits in the game, period. And so a message will get sent to the clubs by way of a video that I do that will say, hey, we must clean this up. So you cannot lead with your helmet like this, especially when it comes to helmet-to-helmet contact. The illegal helmet rule means you can't even make contact lowering your head into the body of a player. But if we focus these helmet-to-helmet shots, I think we're at least better off. So that's going to be a point of emphasis heading into the playoffs. Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate the input. We'll like it better when you bring a referee in next week and listen to Alex Moore talk about his own preparation. Can you imagine Alex Moore, who we will have next week? He's preparing A, for the USFL championship game, and B, to become an umpire in the National Football League, which he will be in the upcoming 2022 season. So that's it for this week. We'll talk to you again next week. This is After the Whistle, and I'm Mike Pereira.